Have you ever walked into a room and felt like you didn't quite belong? Maybe you were the only woman, the only Indian, the only engineer who also loved poetry. Sujatha Narayan has lived that feeling and turned it into fuel. Today, she's a senior vice president and region leader at Wabtec India, where she's driving transformation in one of the world's most traditional industries, rail. From the textile labs of IIT Delhi to the research corridors of Georgia Tech, from corporate America to steel factories across India, her journey is anything but typical. What does it take to lead with conviction in high stakes rooms without losing your core? And how do you bring innovation into industries where change is slow, resistance is high, and the rules were never written with you in mind? If you've ever second guessed yourself or wanted to lead on your own terms, this conversation is going to stay with you. I'm Antony Alex, and you're watching Season 2 of the Leadership Lounge.
When the customer really needs your product, they need your technology, then you can afford to take a stance, complete strong stance on ethics and integrity. A business role is a lot more ambiguous, right?
A lot of variables.
A lot of variables and a lot of things outside your circle of control. So there were ups and downs, and I've had very tough months and quarters where I've not been able to deliver. That was a tough time, but it made me stronger. We've done a fantastic job, I think, in terms of making sure the voice of the women is heard, because leadership development, whether it's women or men, is a journey.
So individual specific.
It's completely individual, because I've seen men who've had really, really softer emotional issues that they need mentoring on. I've seen women who really are talking about business problems that they need mentoring on. So to me, it's a normal distribution, whether it's men or women, and it's very, very individualistic when it comes to mentoring specifically. And really the most important thing of it is the karmanyevadikaraste. Basically, just focus on doing your best and don't get bogged down by what's going to happen, because it's not in your hands.
Hi Sujatha, welcome to the Leadership Lounge. Delighted to have you here. I'm glad we could sort of finally align our schedules and make this happen. So thank you so much for making time for our discussion.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. I'm excited to be having this conversation, and thank you for your patience and understanding in scheduling this around my calendar. Appreciate it.
Delighted. So great. Sujatha, without further ado, let's get straight to it. Yours is a fascinating background, right? You've done so much right from your engineering days, and I want to start with that, right? What made you choose engineering? How did that happen in your life? Of course, polymers. Why and how polymers? If you could tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So I have to admit, and it's the dirty secret, that it's not like I love engineering. Like most of us growing up in that generation, you had to either be a doctor or an engineer. I just wanted to be in IIT, right? It was not about engineering, but I did really love science. Physics and chemistry were my absolute favorite subjects, and science was something I was passionate about, but I really wanted to be an engineer coming out of IIT, so I joined IIT. And interestingly, when I went to IIT Delhi to do my textile engineering degree, it was the only program that offered 3 different variations, and one of them was textile chemistry. So I actually have my BTech in, it says textile engineering, but it's textile chemistry. And when you do textile chemistry, you're working with fibers, right? You have all kinds of fibers you talk about, and the science of making the fibers, and that's really polymer science. So I had a course on fiber science. I did my bachelor's thesis on that. Really fell in love with polymers, and the reason is because I've always liked science, but less of the pure science and more of the applied science. And polymers was a great example where I could use applied science to solve technical problems, and that's really how I got into polymers.
Wow, fantastic. You know, when you said you had to get into IIT, I could totally get it. You're from Chennai, and I think the pressure starts very early, right? Get into a good coaching school, and then write the entrance and the preps and all of that stuff, and then you made it, which is fabulous.
And just so you know, I grew up in the IIT Chennai campus. My father was a professor, so the atmosphere was also such that, you know, everybody, all the good students tried to get into IIT. But interestingly, I want to have a very interesting story to share in that I had no pressure at all.
I was just going to say no pressure at all.
Absolutely none. Interestingly, my father was a professor of chemistry,
Okay.
and he was not a fan of engineering because he was at his heart a pure science person. And when I got into IIT, I could not get into IIT Madras. I had to go to IIT Delhi, and he actually discouraged me from going to IIT. And he said, "Why don't you check it out?" And so I was enrolled in Ethraj College BSc Chemistry for 10 days. And I actually went to college for 10 days. And then I came back and said, no, I want to go to IIT. So I went to IIT Delhi.
IIT is IIT.
Yeah, exactly. So you want the chapa, right? So there was no pressure whatsoever, but the atmosphere was very conducive.
No, I can imagine. And okay, so early days, Sujatha, for you, what was it like in terms of any sort of memories of who made you what you are today? You know, both as a scientist and a leader, mentors, or those who encouraged you, motivated you, pushed you. Can you think of anything from your early days?
I don't think any of us can get to where we are at this age without having those experiences. But some people have stories of one mentor that shaped their life. I don't have that. But what I will say is, I think the starting of all of this is my family themselves, right? I told you my father was a professor in chemistry. My mother, in those days, she's 85 now, but was a master's in chemistry. She worked at National Physical Labs before she was married. My sister is a PhD in Polymers chemistry. My brother is a civil engineer. So very academic family. I think that itself, to a large extent, was a kind of a shaping experience in terms of what I did with my professional future. But at every step of the way, there were different people. I very fondly remember my PhD thesis advisor, Professor A.S. Abhiraman from Georgia Tech. I learned a lot from him, fell deeply in love with polymer science because he was just absolutely brilliant. And at the same time, learned a lot of lessons, leadership lessons. One of the things I remember very clearly is he was a controversial character who spoke his mind, and he would always say that nobody at work can ever offend me. I carried that through my entire career, right? And I've had many times when people think that I would probably be offended or broken about something that's happened around me, and it hasn't affected me. For some reason, I've always carried that it's not about me as a person, it's about the topic, it's about the issue. So I'm just choose not to be offended. Exactly, or water off the lotus leaf, yes.
Yeah, okay. Very interesting, right? IIT Delhi to Georgia Tech. You've had somebody who helped shape early days as a scientist, but also as a leader. I mean, these are lessons that stay with you for life. What was that transition like? Because you pursued a PhD, and now I realize why, because the environment was such at home. But you pursued a PhD probably when it wasn't that common in India, right? To go to the US, get a PhD, and then sort of explore job opportunities there. What was this transition like? I mean, how did it work for you?
So, like you said, the PhD was not a big deal from a home perspective because my father was, my sister was doing her PhD when I did, but it was actually not uncommon. In fact, I'm a little concerned that it has become a lot more uncommon now.
Oh, is it?
In my generation, all of us, we finished our BTech, we went in for a master's and then or a PhD directly. And I saw a lot of my friends who are my peers today have PhDs. So it was very common then to go to the US, do your PhD, and then either go into the academic side or go join a company. So it was not unusual. From a transition perspective, again, it wasn't a big deal at all, frankly. So many of my family lived in the US, friends were there. Most of these universities are teeming with Indians.
Indians, that's true.
So you essentially hung out with Indians. Most of the PhD groups that you worked in under the thesis advisor would be very multinational. So you had people from France, from different parts of Africa, India, multiple people from India. So the transition was very smooth.
And looking at the current scenario, I think you could probably count yourself lucky to have finished your PhD the time you did, because
Absolutely.
Times are very different now, right?
Absolutely, especially now, with what's going on.
Just staying with the theme of finishing your PhD, working in the US for a bit as well, right?
That's right.
Were there moments where you felt the pressure to kind of maybe fit in, both from the perspective of being a woman, but also being an Indian? And now that you've sort of said that the place was teeming with Indians, I guess less of that, but would still love to hear your perspective on both aspects.
First of all, my first job that when I came out of my PhD was in the Northeast Connecticut, a really rural town.
Okay.
Maybe there was one other Indian. Everybody else was white, mostly white men. So it's what you're asking is a good question, right? But the answer is that as long as I remember, way back when, I've been fairly confident even as a child, tough and fairly aggressive for multiple reasons. One, I would say that my parents dealt with me and my brother growing up together exactly equally, whether it was errands at home, expectations on academics, getting into IIT, etc. So there was no difference. So I didn't grow up ever thinking that I'm a girl and so I'm different, right? That was very helpful. I was also a sports person all my school
Basketball,
time.
right?
I was I played basketball quite a bit, and then even in IIT. So that makes you tough. In fact, in IIT, because there weren't any players in the girls, I had to teach them to play the game, so I could create a team, but I would practice with the men. So I was practicing every day, playing basketball with the men. So life and nature made me tough. And in the process, every time I've stepped into a professional environment, whether it's during my PhD or any of my jobs, I forget to think that I'm anything but a professional. So I'm not conscious of the fact that I'm a woman. I'm not conscious of the fact that I'm a foreigner. And so that has really been helpful. So it would be fairly surprising to you that I don't think I've ever felt like I don't fit in. Now, there have been times when I've felt like maybe my voice is not being heard, or I'm not so good at walking into a room and networking with a whole bunch of people that I don't know. That's not a core strength for me, but it doesn't come from a feeling of not being able to fit in, but maybe sometimes I just don't know what to say or who I am, or sometimes in certain circumstances I'm shy. But it hasn't ever been a problem of fitting in or feeling like I don't belong somewhere. I just don't feel that at all.
Both in the US and in India?
Everywhere.
Has no difference?
No difference at all.
And as you kind of went your professional journey, as it sort of over the years as it played out, was there a sort of like either a penny drop moment or a moment where you felt like, I don't just want to be an expert, I want to lead, I want to be a leader of people, a leader of an organization where you can really make an impact, right? Because then you decide how things get done. Was there a moment like that, or it just happened seamlessly and naturally?
So what I would say is, I think as long as I remember, I wanted to be a leader, right? And my mother jokes with me that she remembers that my report cards from 3rd grade, 4th grade always said that she has leadership skills, right? So it was just kind of natural to me. However, I really went into strong academics, doing a master's, PhD, and things like that, became a scientist. That was my first job. And the penny drop moment was, I had done as a corporate researcher, I was working for about 4 years in Connecticut, and I had done a lot of really good work on technology, R&D, published patents and things like that. When my boss, and he still is my favorite boss, his name is Mike Bissett. This was when I was working at Rogers Corporation. He got a job to move to Arizona to run a business. So he was moving from an R&D job to a business role. And he said, hey, he was telling me that I'm going to go. And it just came out of the mouth as, can I come with you, right? And he said, yeah, I'm looking to hire an R&D manager for that entity. And so that was the moment. But it wasn't a realization more than that's what kind of shepherded or heralded the whole leadership journey that I've had.
That was a moment where you kind of felt that I would like
Absolutely
more, rather than just being an R&D person. I would like to actually do more than that, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
And I felt I would bring more value that way, because observing myself, right, I found that I was very excited about the idea of connecting a technology to a customer problem or a customer need. That was what drove me the most. It wasn't the science itself, really, while I was good at it and I was doing well. When you want to be somebody who connects to the business, and the other thing I found that I was really good at understanding, kind of being a jack of all trades to some extent, understanding a lot of different things, asking the right questions. I was not that great at actually doing the experiments, being super detail oriented. That wasn't my strength, right? So putting this all together, I think at a subconscious level, I felt I would be better at R&D management than I would be as a scientist in the long run.
Looking at the way you speak so confidently, so articulate, and you come across as somebody who's really master of all what they survey, right? And so therefore my next question might feel a little redundant, but failures and setbacks, have you had any? Have there been moments where you felt like this is not for me? I don't think I want to do it, or I can do it, but then you get up the next day and power on anyway. Has that happened?
It has, and I'm glad for it, because I think failures make you better at what you do. And if you don't fail, I think you really kind of stagnate at some point. The example that I would share is this was at 3M when I had been doing a product development manager and an R&D manager job for a few years. I had been asking the organization, saying, hey, I'd like to do more. I'd like to do more. And essentially what I was thinking is more from the R&D side. And a couple of times it had come in saying, do you want to run a business? And I'd said no, because I always thought my destiny was to develop technology for customers, right? And then the third time, again, Amit Laroya, who was the managing director of 3M then, and again, a fantastic leader, offered me to run one of the businesses that had been newly formed by combining three businesses. I thought to myself, hey, why not? Because I've been asking for an opportunity, and this is the opportunity that's coming my way. It took a little bit of guts, because I really didn't know anything about running a business. So I took the role, and I can tell you that I was petrified, because I did not have exposure into anything. I didn't know what a profit and loss statement looked like. I didn't know the lines of a P&L. I would go sit in the initial stages in the management meeting with my other colleagues who were running other businesses, and I would feel like I didn't know anything. And at that point, I asked myself, did I do the right thing, right? And I think a lot of it is about just telling myself that I've always succeeded, and it's just a matter of learning. And learning agility is a key skill that I have to develop. And it turned out to be successful. That was a job, unlike an R&D job where a lot of things are in your control. A business role is a lot more ambiguous, right?
A lot of variables.
A lot of variables and a lot of things outside your circle of control. So there were ups and downs, and I've had very tough months and quarters where I've not been able to deliver. That was a tough time, but it made me stronger, and it cemented the fact that I really liked doing that, really liked facing those kinds of challenges and coming out strong out of that.
Now, a slight segue into the rail industry, which is where you've really sort of, I think, spent a lot of time as a leader. It's an industry that is very, very steep in legacy, right? I mean, it's more than 100 years old,
That's right.
150 maybe, and it's been around for a long time. Yet in this industry, you've always been a champion of cutting edge change, right? How has this experience been in terms of driving the transformation? What has really motivated you or pushed you to constantly seek that cutting edge change that you've sought to bring about in the rail industry?
The first and foremost is the environment itself, right? If you take, and I'll talk about Indian Railways, because that's really most of the rail industry in India is about Indian Railways. They're just massive. They're going through a tremendous transformation. If you look at the last 8 or 9 years, I would say that they're truly trying to transform themselves as an institution, both from perspective of behavioral within the organization, corruption and things like that, but also in terms of changing the passenger experience when they travel in a train. Can they drive more freight traffic to the rail side from road, which helps the nation's economy from a logistics cost perspective? This transformation is involved looking at comfort, moving to electrification, security, timeliness, etc., etc. So there is a need in the market where the customer is and the market is trying to transform itself. That's the first step in recognizing that there is appetite. So for example, if you go to 2017, when the new railway minister joined, Piyush Goyal, he said that we're going to electrify the entire network at that point, which was a mixture of electric and diesel at that point in terms of the rolling stock. At the same time, there had been a couple of accidents, and so there was an old coach model called ICF, and he said we're going to switch it all to LHP models because those are safer. These are two pretty big initiatives that they took. Interestingly, we were very much a part of it. We were not doing so much on the diesel side in terms of components, but we were doing a lot on the electric locomotive side. We had a lot on content in the LHP coaches. So when they needed to scale, and this scale was like, they wanted to do everything within a year, we just had to step up. And my job was about selling that story to the globe, because you had to put a lot of investment in to scale operations. So building your personal credibility as a leader, having the ability to articulate this vision to the global organizations so they support the investment, because even today most multinational companies, the investments are approved centrally. And then making sure you have the customer intimacy to understand what they need, what they're looking for, to make sure they understand that you are there to help them to solve their problems. And I think customer centricity has been a really, really core part of being able to make the changes that we've been able to make in the last 7 years, 8 years that I've been with the company.
And I think, Sujatha, whatever you say about the Indian Railways, right, the last 10 to 15 years, there's definitely been a
Absolutely.
tangible and a noticeable change. It's not just Vande Bharat. Of course, Vande Bharat is absolutely fantastic. But also even the changes that have come about in the other trains, the Shatabdis. It's not just about the trains, but also the service, little things,
Absolutely.
And I think that is something that we have really seen a tangible difference or a change in the way the Indian Railways functions or has been functioning. So Wabtec has invested, I think, for you rather, you've invested a lot in the India story, right? In India as a country. How do you feel that the whole Make in India or sort of Atmanirbhar Bharat, how was that played out from your perspective as a professional, as an Indian working in India, working for an organization that's invested in India?
No, you're absolutely right. We have almost 3 million square feet of factories in India. And over the years, hundreds of millions of dollars have been spent investing locally in India. I think everybody knows the business case behind doing it typically, right? You're more cost effective in a very, very price sensitive market, irrespective of whether it's railways, automotive, industrial, or FMCG goods. India is one of the most price sensitive markets in the world. So cost competitiveness is a key part of the strategy why you want to localize. That's one, because the labor costs are much lower. And it's not just about your own factories, but it's also your supplier ecosystem, right? Wabtec is actually a design and assemble company, and the manufacturing of our parts is all done in these 400, 500 suppliers we work with across the country. So competitive is one. The second reason you typically localize is because you want to be close to the customer.
Yes.
Right, and that's the standard thing. But where I find has been the game changer is in the process of localization, we have increased our skill set, we have increased our knowledge, to the point that we can support our customers well. If you just transfer something to India and you make it and sell it, if you're selling imported products, most of the time what happens with an Indian team is when a customer has a challenge, they have a question, you're usually running to your global counterparts and getting the answers. And customers are very, very aware of the fact that multinationals struggle with this topic. Wabtec philosophically has always believed that the support, the knowledge, the wherewithal, the know-how, and the know-why should all sit locally, to the extent now that, for example, our locomotive engineers in India design not only the India locomotives, but all the locomotives in the world outside of North America. So if you look at any Wabtec locomotive, whether it's in Egypt or Kazakhstan or Australia or anywhere in the world, it's designed in India. So that's the kind of competence we've built in the country, and this is true for our other product lines as well. So I would say that it has tremendously increased our confidence over time, because it's not just the know-how that's come our way, it's the know-why. And now we have gone to the next level where we're able to design our own products for the India market. And we have great examples of innovations that we have made specifically to address the India market.
So I'd read somewhere, Sujatha, that, and I don't know if these numbers are accurate or correct, but your India business is about 600 million and what you make for the world is about 200 million. Is that correct?
That
roughly?
is right. That's right.
And so that's very exciting, because you're actually, now what you're saying is a lot of what you're doing for all of these countries globally is actually getting done out of India.
That's right.
And it's today a third of of the revenue that you're generating from India already.
Right.
And you foresee that to sort of grow exponentially?
Yeah, so in 2020, we were about a $700 million enterprise at that time. And we conceived what we call a $1 billion plan. And we actually presented this to our global investors. And that had a portion that would come from India region's business and then India for the world as well. And the India for the world included our engineering support that we give the world, where we're designing products and testing products for the world. It's also the products we manufacture in our factories, and it's also the parts that we source from suppliers here for global factories. So we do all the qualification of the suppliers locally, and then they ship to the global factories, whether they're in US, Europe, or anywhere. So that part has been growing, and I'm really proud to share. And this only last week, we had unveiling and the naming ceremony for the first locomotive that we are building for Africa. This is a very large, actually the largest iron ore mining project coming up in Guinea. And this is being done by a company called Rio Tinto, and they have given the order to Wabtec US, and Wabtec decided to build this in India. So all of them were in India. I was in Patna last week. This is our plant in Marhora in Bihar. And we did an unveiling ceremony, and the first locomotive is getting tested and ready to leave
Congratulations.
in June. Yeah, no, thank you.
Big news.
Very proud of that, very excited about that. We expect to do a lot more of that, setting ourselves to be a global hub, one of the global hubs for Wabtec Corporation. And Indian Railways is also really excited about the fact that this would be the first and the largest locomotive export project from India.
Wonderful.
Ever. So we're very proud of that as well.
Well, here's to more such success stories. This is fantastic, right?
Thank you.
I mean, make in India is one thing, but make in India for the world is a whole different ballgame altogether. And I wish you and Wabtec a lot of success in that area.
And if you actually tune into the Honorable Railway Minister Ashwini Vaishnav, he's been talking a lot about this, about how we are taking our first steps at becoming a global hub for rail. And we're a part of that journey and very proud of that.
I'm going to keep an eye out for more on this in this space, because it's very exciting, and I think there's potential for scale here, right? I mean, there's so much you can do with this.
Absolutely.
India it's probably one of the few countries in the world that can really scale this kind of a business. Staying with rail, Sujatha, it's seen as a very traditional industry, if you will, or you've always been a champion of innovation and pushing for more. Is that something that you've been able to do successfully without too much resistance, or how have you sort of worked your way around that? Because innovation and an industry like rail, you somehow don't see them like hand in hand, going hand in hand, right? So is that something you can throw some light on?
So the homologation process in rail is long, but like I said before, right, Indian Railways as well as the metro sector is going through, is either metro is nascent, it's growing, and Indian Railways is transforming in a big way. So the pull is there. So it's less of a struggle than it would have been 20 years ago, maybe, because there's a need to solve a lot of issues related to safety, security, comfort. And so there is a tremendous amount of appetite for it. The process of doing it is laborious and tedious and can be painful sometimes. And that is what you really have to have the patience and the resilience to work through, because you'll have some that fail, but you can't get discouraged by that.
Yeah.
But one of the things I did want to mention is that what really surprised me about this whole thing was the role of leadership, right? You would think an organization like Indian Railways that's been around for 100 plus years would have everything in place, and it shouldn't matter who is in the leadership. But I've been surprised, and I've also been very lucky that when I joined the rail industry in 2017, you had some real stalwarts. You had Shri Piyush Goyal as the railway minister. You had Mr. Lohani as the chairman of the railway board. You had Mr. Sudhanshu Mani, who's known as the father of Vande Bharat, as the general manager of ICF. These were all people who had a vision and also really pushed the vision to a very, very strong execution. I see the same thing with the minister now, the Honorable Minister Shri Ashwini Vaishnav is the same way in terms of having a vision and really driving it. So, and it's interesting that even in a sector like a government sector, leadership matters so much. And that was really surprising, but it was a really pleasant experience to work with people who have decided that they are going to make this happen because it's good for the country.
And you've been, I think, very lucky in that respect, having had the opportunity to work with a cross section of very fine leaders. And so that kind of brings me to what I wanted to ask you next about A, conservative industry, B, you work so much with the government. What are your views on, let's say, ethical leadership in this, in this, given all of these aspects that you have to deal with? How do integrity and impact intersect for you? If you can share a little bit of your thoughts on that.
No, that's a great question. When I first left for Wabtec from 3M, one of the comments that somebody made to me was it's a business to government, directly tendering with the government. Be really careful about the ethics and integrity aspect of it. Now, I believe, first of all, that I was hired at Wabtec because I came from a company like 3M that's known for its ethics and integrity, because it was critical to have people in place who had unshakable principles and integrity to protect the company, right? Then when I came in and to run the Wabtec transit business, I initiated something called non-negotiables. And these were safety, quality, and then I said compliance. And compliance meant compliance, ethics, and integrity. So it was about meeting the law of the land, but it's also about personal and company integrity. And we really did, I did with the help of my team, did a whole campaign around it, right? Just talked about it non-stop for 2 years, included it in onboarding of newcomers. We just talked about the fact that we are not going to win by cheating, right? It's just not going to happen. Now, it's easy to say these things, but if you're in a market where everybody's doing these kinds of things, it's hard to execute. Now, I think that's where technology plays a big role. If you're in spaces where you're bringing value-added technology to the customer, where the customer really needs your product, they need your technology, then you can afford to take a stance, complete strong stance on ethics and integrity. So that's what we did. We were selling brake systems. We were one of the few suppliers, and brake systems are so critical for safety. Similarly, doors and pantographs and things, everything that were either very safety critical or very high technology. And if you're in these spaces, it's easier to implement it. And when you implement it, it rubs off on the ecosystem as well. In fact, the high point of my career at Wabtec, about 4 years back, my sales leader came and he said, somebody in the ecosystem said, hey, there's no point asking you for anything. Your madam will just not give anything anyway, right? To me, I don't think I've had a bigger compliment than that in my career. You talked about impact and ethics. To me, it goes hand in hand. And what I can tell you is that ultimately ethics wins from an impact perspective, because what your customer sees is when this company doesn't compromise on integrity in any way, they're not going to compromise on the product integrity too. So then they start reaching out to you. You go from being a supplier to a consultant. Every time they have a topic that they're ruminating to see if they need to change things, they pick up the call and call your engineering organization.
So you've built trust.
Exactly. So trust, confidence, credibility, all of that has come in this combination of ethics and impact as a combination.
Shifting gears a little bit, Sujatha, you run an organization that employs a lot of people, right? How do you manage to stay connected with the pulse of the organization? Let's say the folks on the shop floor, or the folks who are actually getting their hands dirty, getting things done. How do you manage to, at the level that you're at, how are you able to keep your...
It's a great question. It's not easy. And I would say very honestly that I've had years that I've done that very well. And I've had years where I've been so wrapped up in some large initiatives that I've not been able to do as much. But I think this connection, it's to me a two-way street. The first part of it starts with your communication to the employees, for them to know what's going on in the company, what are we trying to do, why are we trying to do it. So I spend a lot of time on that piece. With all hands meetings, I write blogs for the entire organization. So I've been able to make sure that my vision, the actions of my leadership team, and everything that we are doing is getting communicated down through the entire organization.
Everybody gets to hear.
Everybody gets to hear. For example, this $1 billion vision that I talked about, you can go and ask anybody in Wabtec India, absolutely anybody who's been around for at least 3 to 6 months, and they will know that we have a $1 billion vision. They will know their role in it. For example, we ran a campaign called Lakshya, which is basically our goal was to be $1 billion. What's your role in it? And we ran it at every site.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So personally, I also, one of my favorite things to do is to visit the sites. So I actually have 5 factories, couple of sheds, couple of offices. So I keep doing the round of that. I'm out every month visiting sites. And every time I'm at a site, I'm doing roundtables. So roundtables have been a great way of connecting because the organization is now almost 3,000 people.
Yes, that's a lot of people to sort of stay in touch with.
Correct. So at one point, I had actually done roundtables and had touched every single person in the company.
Really?
It was literally a bi-weekly affair over the entire year. Hard to sustain something like that. The other thing, when I visit sites and even in the home offices that I do a lot of walking around and talking to employees. But I have to admit, it's a little bit of an up and down. Sometimes I do a lot more of it. Sometimes I'm so busy with some large initiatives that I don't find time for it. Because you're asking me the question, I'm making a mental note to kind of go and increase that now.
How do you deal with high stakes, high uncertainty kind of decision-making moments where it's fuzzy, it's not really clear, stakes are high, you're not sure, yet you have to take calls and you have to take some of them, maybe even calls have to be taken quickly. How do you do that? How do you deal with it?
Yeah, you deal with it quite often, unfortunately. But it starts, first of all, I remember one of my early bosses telling me, and it always stuck with me, that you're wearing the coat that has to absorb all these uncertainties and shocks, and you don't pass it down the line, right? Because what you want your team to be doing is to think clearly, have the data to help you make the right decision. So one of the key things is to stay calm, irrespective of the circumstances. We've had a lot of very different situations, very interesting examples where things have been very scary at the moment for the business, and the point is to stay calm and keep your team calm. The second thing, which is very common in my style, and I know different people have different styles, is to really listen to everybody. So I actually have, every time I have to make a tough decision, I get the group together, I make sure every function, everybody voices. It's not just the people who report to me, but people lower in the organization. I make sure, because India can be hierarchical, they don't speak up, so I'll have to call out on people, ask for opinions, and then I make the decision and I own the decision. So this is, one is not to delay making decisions, because that can be disastrous to a business. It can also be very demotivating to teams, right? Second is to own the decision as mine and not try, if things go wrong, not try to say that, hey, this is what they advised me, or this is how
nobody else gets thrown under the bus.
Ever. And that builds trust in the organization,
yes.
right? They know that you've got their back, and even if mistakes get made, wrong decisions do get made, but they know that you will own the final decision that had to be made. Really not ever thinking that I am the subject matter expert. Because if I think about it, I'm not really a subject matter expert on anything I'm doing right now. But I know how to ask the right questions. I've developed the experience to know when I'm, pardon the language, being bullshitted, right? So being able to discern between the right and the wrong information, challenging, asking the right question, being detailed enough to understand the problem, and then you make the decision and you stick with it. And as long as a majority of your decisions turn out right, I think you're golden.
I think those are really, how do I say, golden words for any leader looking to learn, or aspiring leader looking to learn from, somebody like you, in terms of how do you really go about being a leader in an organization like the one you're in. And which actually brings me to something that I think most leaders face, and I'm sure you are no exception, which is really resistance. It could be to change, which is the most common, right? You want to implement something and people are like pushing back, saying, nah. Or to new ideas, or even to new leaders that you might want to bring on board, and your team is just not on board with it, right? So fundamentally, how do you handle resistance? How do you handle the naysayers? And how do you deal with it?
It's a great question, and a very key competency of leadership, I think, especially the higher you go in an organization. It's been a journey, right? I think by nature, I don't know if I was particularly good at it. But it started off in my early parts of my career really adapting to situational leadership, not having a very rigid leadership style, a cookie cutter style where this is how I operate and everything else is wrong. To be able to adapt your leadership style based on the problem you're dealing with, based on the topic, based on the person. Essentially, people leadership is the key. So ability to change your style. Then I evolved a little more to what I would call intense, informal relationships. I found that the ability to overcome resistance, even in the most professional organizations in any country in the world, depended significantly on the relationships you have with people. So, and this did, when I started my career, I was a very linear person, right? I would send emails, copy people, everybody knows this is how things get done. But in the second phase of my career and now as well, I spend a lot of time building relationships and with all levels of the organization, all kinds of people, because I think it gives you a shot at moving the naysayers to agree to what you're looking at or coming to a consensus.
Is that something you've learned with experience?
Absolutely.
Over time?
Over time. I'm talking about really a 25 year journey of slowly changing myself to know that these things are important. But most recently, I've encountered a very interesting concept called friction. So we were at Northwestern University in Kellogg for a leadership executive education program. There's a professor, David Chantal, who talked about the concept of friction when you're trying to sell an idea or an innovation. And the fundamentals there, and I'm really fascinated, I'm reading their book right now, is that most of us have been talking about fuel. When we want to sell an idea, we want to pitch an innovation, we throw more and more of fuel at it, right? And we say, how do we package the story better? How can I convince them better? But most of the time, the resistance comes from friction. Either people don't want to change the status quo, or there is some emotional impact of what the change you're trying to make, etc., etc. So I'm actually learning a very new concept right now of overcoming friction. I've been putting it in practice in the last few months. Really, every time I have to sell an idea, for example, I lead the mergers and acquisitions part personally in India, apart from my regular leadership role of the current business. And when you want to pitch the idea to the globe to sell an acquisition, apart from creating the deck that we usually do and put all the numbers, etc., I always have a list of why would the key stakeholders who make the decision, why would they say no? I make the list of points that they may say no, and I say, well, how do I mitigate each of these questions? It's working. So it's work in progress. I'm still learning the skill, but I think, like I said, it's really been a journey.
It's a journey, actually. Leadership is a journey,
Absolutely.
Right? You would agree. What's your personal barometer for a great day at work? I mean, when you go back and say, yes, this is why I do what I do.
I would say two things. One is if I've spent quality time with my team, and I'm not talking about my leadership team, but really the team on the ground. It could be that I'm visiting a site, I'm walking through the plant, or I'm having a round table where we're having a conversation about the company and what I want to do, what they want to do. So every time I visit my sites, I feel like I've had a great day. And the second is when I visit customers. I just absolutely love that. Spending time with customers is one of my favorite part of my job. I do it as much as I can, although at leadership level, you do get sucked into a lot of internal meetings. But broadly, I would say if I'm able to coach and mentor a team to become more impactful than they would have already been, that's just the highlight of my day.
Job well done.
Yeah.
Sujatha, what would you say to, let's say, a young woman considering a career in rail, aerospace, industrial design? It feels like these are areas or career choices that women may not feel like it's something they would excel in, or worse, not belong, right? What would you say to somebody like that in terms of career choices? How would this work?
I'll say complete nonsense. I mean, there is absolutely no place I think that a woman doesn't belong, especially in today's age. Traditionally, when you think of these industries, you're thinking of lifting heavy things and things like that if you're thinking of a manufacturing setup. But all that has changed, right? Everything is so electronic, driven by computers. And also, there are so many jobs in these spaces that are in engineering and every other function as well. So I don't think that should be a consideration at all. I think women should, if they want to work for in a certain industry, absolutely they can, and I think they can do any job. For example, we have jobs like field services, right, where you have to go and you have to work at the customer's shed, and these are kind of rough environments. I would say probably these are like the extreme jobs which might create some discomfort, and I think we can even do women can even do that. So I think it's a blank canvas, that their career is a blank canvas for them, and they should draw on it as they see fit.
Staying with the theme, diversity, right, and inclusion. Hot button topics, particularly with, President Trump coming to power in the US. Organizations are having a rethink about it. What is your view on this in terms of, truly making or creating an inclusive workplace, right? Particularly in, let's say, core sectors like rail. How would you really go about building a truly inclusive workplace? And maybe I should take a step back. Is this something that is of importance to Wabtec and you as a leader?
Absolutely, no doubt about it. To me, diversity and inclusion, while it's made famous as a term recently, it's an absolute non-negotiable, right? I believe it's, I mean, I'm taking an extreme example, but there were things like slavery that was absolutely not the right thing and had to be abolished. To me, this isn't that category that you've got to figure this out. Diversity and inclusion is important. You've got to make it happen. And so, whether to me, the numbers and the KPIs, they're important, because as soon as you start measuring something and monitoring something, it creates progress, it creates momentum, it creates basically it makes people, forces people to work on the topic even if they're not inclined to it. So there is still the numbers part, but the numbers is very secondary, right? It is about doing the right thing. And fundamentally, if you step back and ask the question, why do you need an inclusive environment? I think in today's world, especially, your customers, your consumers are all completely inclusive, right? You've got women making so many decisions. You've got people from all over the country, and inclusivity is not just about women, right? It's about a region of the country,
Yes.
and in other parts of the world, it's about the color of the skin, disability, veterans. I mean, we've got a very nice system at Wabtec called ERG, which is Employee Resource Groups.
Yes.
And we've created about 6 groups. Women of Wabtec is actually the most mature one there. But we've got things like disabilities, veterans, and just the policy change that's happening because of the new government is not changing our efforts. It's changing maybe reporting out, and maybe that's making this less onerous in terms of having to report out and answer questions. But we've not skipped a beat when it comes to creating inclusive workplaces. In fact, only yesterday I got news that we got some certification for disabilities. So for the longest time, we've been working on gender and women of Wabtec, and it's something I've personally championed very, very strongly. But we're still only at about 25% women in the workplace. I think some of the reasons, to me, there are 2 main reasons. One, most of who we have in a company like Wabtec, in the kind of industries you were talking about before, are mechanical engineers or maximum electrical, a little bit of software engineers. If you go to the colleges themselves, you'll find a disparity in the kind of engineering women are doing. So I think the base itself is an issue. The second issue is that women are dropping out of the workplace because of life events. They either move with their husband, child, etc., etc., etc. So all we can do is to make sure that we create an environment that's conducive and supportive. So we've been taking a lot of efforts across the world, but in Wabtec India, we've done a fantastic job, I think, in terms of making sure the voice of the women is heard, making sure they have the support they need to be able to not only stay at work, but also to grow in their careers. It's a difficult topic, because as a business leader, if I, for example, I'm hiring for a position and it's business critical, for me to wait to hire a diversity candidate is hard, because I can empathize with the challenge that a lot of the men leaders face in the organization, because they've got deliverables to meet, they've got to finish the hiring. So the patience to wait to find a woman candidate or a disabled candidate is hard, but it's got to be done. And typically these things have to be mandated top down. While I think from an inclusivity perspective, I think there's not enough being done in terms of a true understanding of why it's important. There is just so much data that tells you that inclusive companies actually perform better, right? And when you talk about attrition, I think women, there is less attrition in women. They give more of their heart and soul to the job, etc., etc. So there's just, I don't think we do enough of a job to convince people down the organization that inclusivity is important. And I think that's another part of the journey that we need to do as the world. We need to do much better.
Women of Wabtec, wow.
That's right.
I just love it.
That's what we call it.
Yeah. It's just staying with me. It will stay with me. It's a lovely acronym. I'm going to move into a slightly more controversial area, if you will. Have you ever experienced a situation where you decided that I'm not going to tone myself down? And how did that end for you?
Maybe one example.
Sure.
This was really soon after I'd come from the US, right? So not too conscious about the cultural nuances in India, because I'd never really worked in India, right? I did my undergrad and left, worked there for 10 years, came back. And so it was all about what was good for the company. That's really all I focused on, really focused on getting things done, maybe missing out a little bit on the nuances of relationships, massaging of egos and things that had to be done. So I did have a situation where I had a leader who was unhappy with my style, and I could have toned it down, and if I may use Game of Thrones language, I could have kneeled, but I did not bend the knee. Yeah, that's right, exactly. And I chose not to do it for whatever reason. I can't remember what I was going through, and it did cost me a lot from a career perspective. It is from that learning that I have realized that nuances in relationship becomes very, very critical. And you've got to manage these nuances very proactively. And I've applied that in the last decade, and I think that's really done wonders for my career.
But that's something that's a great learning, because for young professionals, particularly women, right? They're so focused on doing the job and doing it well that often they miss out on the maybe softer aspects of, right? And that's what you're really bringing out, that this is something that younger, particularly women professionals, they should focus on some of the softer aspects. Maybe networking also, would you say?
Absolutely. Because I was just thinking of that when you were speaking, because one of the things, and I think most of the women audience who are hearing this podcast will identify with it, we're all about getting the work done and going home because we've got a second job to do, right? So that effort to, hey, let me give this call to this person today and talk to them for half an hour to build a relationship. Or let me attend this coffee event because I'll be able to
grab a coffee or even a drink.
Absolutely. And so we don't do this very well because we've got so many other things, responsibilities that we have. And this is what I would like the young professionals to think of today. These things are important. The other thing I'd like to say is I think we also need to teach this in our curriculum, teach some of the softer stuff about how communication in B schools, but I mean, why not even for an engineer? Everywhere, because if you look at our engineering curriculum, we've got engineering subjects, they'll have something humanities, but there's really no soft skills at all.
That's true for our education system across the board, right? There is no soft skills. Is just you are expected to just figure it out as you go along. Everything else is more important.
Correct. And unfortunately, a lot of people stumble and sometimes don't recover. And I think women are a victim of something like this. And they would benefit a lot if you could teach them proactively that some of these things matter.
Which is a wonderful segue into what I wanted to ask you next. And maybe you've already answered it, which is in terms of women's leadership development. Do you see a blind spot in what companies are doing or not doing in terms of developing women as leaders within their organizations? Is that something that you have seen or experienced?
I think different companies do a different level of job. I've seen companies who do a really good job. And I think there's two parts to it. One is the longevity of the effort, right? It should not be a spur of the moment. This year, we are fancying this initiative, and next year we're going to forget all about it. Because leadership development, whether it's women or men, is a journey, right? So whenever companies have stuck to this for years in a row, they've seen the benefits of it. You've seen women get to the leadership role, to the C-suite roles, and do really well. One of the blind spot I think that many companies suffer from is that it is the leadership development of women is considered to be the job of the women. So you've got a women's organization within the company, and that women's organization worries about the leadership development of the women. I think the executive management team should have this foremost, and any topics of inclusivity and diversity, I think, should be part of the core part of the organization, yes, and not be run as a peripheral Absolutely. Part of the organization.
Makes sense. As a mentor, Sujatha, how do you approach mentorship? And I'll explain what I mean by that. Do you take a different approach to mentoring women? Because after all, the way they need to be mentored is very different from, let's say, mentoring some, a man in that sense. Or do you feel like...
I'm not sure I agree. And the reason I say that is I've mentored a lot of men as well as women in my career. And each person has a very unique set of things that they need mentorship on.
So individual specific.
It's completely individual, because I've seen men who've had really, really softer emotional issues that they need mentoring on. I've seen women who really are talking about business problems that they need mentoring on. So to me, it's a normal distribution, whether it's men or women, and it's very, very individualistic when it comes to mentoring specifically.
Sujatha, the world we live in today, very different from maybe a few years ago. We're living in a world of AI, automation, and change that is so accelerated that it's almost scary, right? Things are changing very, very quickly. What would you say are essential skills today for a professional beyond, let's say, technical expertise, right? We spoke a little bit a while ago about, the softer skills. But is there anything else, particularly in an AI sort of driven world? What should leaders or aspiring leaders be looking at?
So for AI specifically, I think everyone in the organization needs to become AI intelligent, right? In terms of the basic skills that drive efficiency, productivity, and then of course the engineers have a lot more opportunity. But my favorite topic on the concept of learning, I think that the key thing that everybody, whether they're technical or non-technical, need to know is the ability to learn, right? The learning agility is actually one of the most critical competencies of today's era. There's a really interesting book that I read by Yuval Noah Harari called The 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. And he talks about what are the three major things that are going to affect the future. I think it's biotechnology, the ecological disaster, and the third is artificial intelligence. And there's one chapter completely on just the future of work. And essentially he says we're getting into an era where every 5 years you're going to have to reskill yourself. We're also getting into an era where most of the traditional jobs are going to be taken away by AI. This is probably well into the future. But to me, the ability to be able to reskill yourself is almost the most important thing. And so the question is, how do you teach that? And so I was thinking recently, right, if you don't practice learning, it's difficult to learn. The example is all these years I've been working, not studying. So I'm actually doing a course right now. This is on my spiritual journey. And I have to by heart a lot of shlokas. I am just not able to do it because it's been ages since I learned anything by heart. Really struggling with remembering concepts, learning these shlokas by heart. So it's been a real struggle. So I think we need to teach people how to learn. I don't know how you do that, but I think that would be a very interesting thing to add to technical people today, either in college or in the work environment.
Do you feel that this has given you this whole learning, the shlokas has maybe made you think differently or has rewired your brain to some extent? Do you feel a difference?
Very, very significantly. I got into this journey. I'm from a religious family, But I wasn't. But about 5 years back, I got involved. I attended a Bhagavad Gita class, and I've been doing a lot of courses since then. And Bhagavad Gita is a fantastic book. It's not really, I mean, you don't even have to look at it as a religious book. It is, but you can learn so much from it. Life lessons. And really the most important thing of it is the karmanyevadikaraste. Basically, just focus on doing your best and don't get bogged down by what's going to happen, because it's not in your hands. It's made a tremendous difference to me, my ability to just take things as it comes. Not get stressed about, because in the corporate environments are always difficult, especially the higher you go, the more you get embroiled in various aspects of how corporations work. And just being really zen about it is what I've learned.
So don't worry about the fruits.
Don't worry
just
about the fruits.
Just focus on your work.
That's right.
Okay.
And lots of learnings. And I think I've become a much, much calmer person. I can't remember the last time I really got angry. Right? I have not. Sometimes I'll simulate anger to just make a tough point with my team. I'm not even feeling angry inside, but I'll do that because you need a little bit of that in terms of your communication. But you don't get angry because you just realize that you really get into it. It's all Maya and things like that, and so it doesn't affect you, and that helps a lot.
I'm sure your teams also figured that out about you by now, and they're saying
possibly what happened to her.
Yeah, this is Sujatha's fake anger. Don't worry about it. Sujatha, what advice would you have for professionals who are, let's say, mid-career, who are at that point, maybe when they're feeling a sense of stagnation or a feeling of being stuck, particularly in industries which might feel a little slow, right, where you feel like nothing's happening? How would you guide them or advise them on how to move ahead? Sort of like mid-career blues, if you will.
Yeah, no, it's a tough one because it is, after all, a pyramid, right? So not everybody can move at the same pace to the same level. First and foremost, usually these kinds of conversations that I've had in the past starts with the question of, what is your definition of success? I spend some time making sure that they have introspected well enough while they're feeling stuck. Is it because of somebody's definition that every 2 or 3 years you have to get a promotion and you have to move to the next level? Are they just not enjoying what they're doing? I have these questions. I spend a lot of time talking to them about it, because to me, success is whatever you aspired to do, did you achieve it? That's it. And and when I talk to women, I always talk about this, because there are women who just come to work because they want a job, but their really primary success definition is back home in terms of parenting, or there are women who want to come to work and want to be a CEO. So it's absolutely about your own definition. So make sure we have a lot of conversation around that when people feel stuck. The second area which I talk to is challenge back, because when they say I feel stuck, I'm not growing, and I see my classmate from when I was in college who's in investment banking doing so much more, making so much more money. These are the standard conversations that happen with a lot of people in the mid-career, because they compare a lot. I challenge back to them as to why are you stuck and how much of it is to do with you. So are you learning agile? Are you proactive? How's your work ethic? And there's a whole bunch of things that help people introspect. It's not easy. You can't solve their problem for them, right? But you can have these conversations to see if you can drive people towards more happiness. Because to me, ultimately, that's the goal, right? And sometimes people get really caught up about, I haven't been promoted in 2 or 3 years, I'm not a vice president now, and these kinds of things. And a lot of conversation around, what does that really mean? Are you not challenged in what you're doing? And of course, pay is an important part, and that's fair. I think that's absolutely fair. So those conversations help. And depending on the person, it goes very differently.
So essentially, try and get each person to arrive at their own definition of success rather than being influenced by what others are saying. Figure out what is it that their own definition of success would be, right? So if you were to ask somebody, let's say you're giving advice now and you won't be able to speak to them one-on-one, you'd probably ask them to think a little bit or introspect a little bit more about how do you define success for yourself.
Yeah, that's the first part. But the second part I would really ask them to look at is, are they doing everything they should be doing to grow? Because it does happen a lot of time, people complain, but they don't want to put the effort needed to grow. And it's not an entitlement, right? So they need to understand that growth in an organization is not entitlement. They have to put in a lot of effort, and that's a combination of various things. We talked about networking quite a bit, right? It makes a huge difference when you want to move from the mid-level to the executive level. Communication skills, executive presence, there's just so many other skills. And then the other part of it is also learning. Just saying, what have you learned lately, right? Pushing them to be more learning agile, more learning focused, because it also can get you the sense of not being stuck when you're learning something, because you're accomplishing, and as you learning always helps you grow in an organization.
If you had a blank check to rewrite the engineering curriculum in India, right? What are 3 must-have modules it should contain from your perspective? You have a blank check. Government of India has said, Dr. Sujatha Narayan, do your thing.
I have to admit, I don't have very strong feelings. It's been a long time since I did my engineering. But I think one, I would say for sure, this whole idea of artificial intelligence, big data, that has to come into the curriculum in a very strong way. It cannot be one course in the 4 years, right? I think you have to really take it all the way from the first year to the 4th year with increasing level of complexity, because these students are moving into the world that's going to be run by AI. So I think that's key.
AI is must.
Right. The second we talked about, I think, right in the beginning, is much more on the soft skills. I would love to see at least one course every semester that's focused on a critical soft skill, right? You've got communication skills, you've got how do you prepare good presentations, and negotiation skills. There's just so many things you can learn from the soft skill perspective. And if you're taking 6 classes in a semester, one of them being in a soft skill is I think, very doable. And then the third is what we again talked about before, is how do you teach students to learn, right? Because today they go in, let's say you're a chemical engineer, you do a bunch of chemical engineering courses, you may do some mandatory social humanities courses depending on the college that you're going to, but it's all about learning subject that exists, right? That's what today's learning is all about. There is some knowledge that is there and you have to learn it and imbibe that. But we are in a world where that knowledge is continuously changing, like every day, every week, every month. How do you teach students to be able to learn? And I think that's tricky. I don't know the solution to that, but I really think that should be part, especially for this generation of engineering students.
Very helpful, Sujatha. And I think that I hope the government is working on some, if not all, of your suggestions. I'd say AI is the easy one. I'm sure it's going to find its way into the curriculum very quickly.
Absolutely.
If it's already not there. It's the softer skills actually that that GOI needs to look at for not just engineers but across the spectrum.
Correct.
It's something that's critical.
I think this probably MBA courses will already have that, but going back into the traditional engineering sciences, for them bringing it into core of everybody's thing it's doable. I think it's just intent and regulation and things will drive that. I think the third piece is much harder.
Understood.
How do you teach somebody to learn? That's tricky.
No, that's very tricky.
Yeah.
And different strokes for different folks, right?
That's
because today the kind of people that we have also are very different.
That's right.
And so challenging. Okay, fair enough. We are now in my favorite segment, which is the rapid fire. We are calling it Steel, Soul and Sujatha.
Okay.
All right. Now, just whatever question I throw at you, whatever comes to mind first. Don't overthink it.
Okay.
Spontaneity is what we're looking for.
Could be dangerous.
That's all right. We'll handle the danger. One leadership myth you would like to bust.
Women can't lead in all fields.
Okay. Book or film that changed how you see the world.
The Bhagavad Gita.
The best advice you have ever received and the worst.
The best advice was don't be offended about anything at work. The worst was personal, which is when my husband told me when I first got married, saying, just be yourself with his parents.
All right. Your most unexpected learning from your time in the US.
Dignity of labor and the respect for all kinds of people at all kinds of jobs. Basically,
that's something
across
we don't
society.
see too much of in India, right?
That's right.
What's something people often misunderstand about manufacturing?
Today's world, they misunderstand that it's a lot of physical labor, which it no longer is.
Much more automation and
That's
tech.
right.
One word that describes your leadership in 2025.
Transformation.
A career risk you are so glad you took.
Moving from R&D to business.
What's your signature move in a crisis?
Calming myself down.
A city you'd live if work and weather weren't an issue.
Chennai.
I knew that was coming. A moment at Wabtec that made you emotional.
I mentioned it before when a customer acknowledged the ethics and integrity of me as a leader of Wabtec.
What do you secretly geek out about outside of work?
I binge on shows.
You binge on shows?
Yes.
Any favorite shows that you can recommend of late, recent times?
Recent times, I saw this Khaki series, stories of Bihar,
Bihar
stories of
chapter
Bengal, Bihar
and
chapter, Bengal chapter.
Bengal chapter.
I think that was the last binged.
And lastly, an innovation you wish you had invented.
Something related to the environment, especially with the pollution in the ocean. So an innovation that could sweep up the oil spills, dumping of plastic waste in the ocean.
Well, Sujatha, you've done pretty well. You've answered all the questions quickly and spontaneously. So,
Were you scoring me?
I was scoring you. And we've got a little hamper there for you once we're done. So I just, want to sort of now round off our session. I'd like you to maybe sum up everything that we have kind of been talking about from the perspective of what would be your advice to young leaders, particularly women leaders, right, or aspiring women leaders, on how to navigate the world that we live in and how to ensure that you are well positioned to sort of carve, something out for yourself as a leader.
First part, I'm going to repeat what I said before. My message to women leaders is make sure you understand what your definition of success is and not get influenced by any other definitions.
Yes.
And it can be you're not a failure if you're not ambitious. It truly has to be what you're looking out for yourself, and can you achieve that? And to go about getting to whatever that might be, I like to talk about the 3 C's. And first and foremost is competence. There is no shortcut to professional and career growth. You've got to be really damn good at what you do and be known for it. The second is confidence. So have confidence that you can be relevant, you can bring value, and you can be impactful, and that matters. And the third is courage. Take risks, be willing to take risks with your career. Any experience you have is always incremental and always leads to growth. So that's it. So define your success and focus on the 3 C's.
Thank you so much, Sujatha.
You're welcome.
It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the Leadership Lounge. I always believe that every leader I speak to, there is so much I learn as a professional from each of them. And you're no exception. In fact, you've shared so much that I feel like anybody who's watching today's session is going to come away much, much richer for having learned from a seasoned professional like you. So thank you so much for having made time, and thank you so much for having come on the show.
Thank you for having me, and it was a pleasure for me. And there are very few people who want to sit and listen to me talking for so long. So I appreciate it, and I enjoyed the conversation very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.